The recent military coup in Niger has cast a shadow of uncertainty over the trajectory of France's role in West and Central Africa. France and Africa have a long and complicated history. For centuries, France colonized much of Africa, and the legacy of colonialism continues to shape relations between the two today. In recent years, there has been growing resentment in Africa towards France, and the relationship between the two sides has become increasingly strained. The recent turmoil in Niger, mirroring earlier unrest in nearby Burkina Faso and Mali, reveals a distressing pattern across these former French colonies. These nations grapple with violent insurgencies and have experienced military takeovers in recent years. These events have stirred resentment against France, viewed by critics as clinging to its colonial past. It has now become a scapegoat in a region grappling with poverty, climate challenges, and the rise of Islamist militancy, amplifying tensions in a precarious environment. In this video, we will explore the reasons why France and Africa have fallen out. We will look at the history of colonialism, the legacy of Françafrique, and the current state of relations between the two. Let's start with the most basic reason: colonialism. You see, France began colonizing Africa in the 19th century, and by the early 20th century, it had control of over 10 million square kilometers of land and 20 million people. The French colonial empire in Africa was vast and diverse, encompassing countries from the Maghreb to the Congo. The colonial period was a time of great exploitation and oppression for Africans. The French colonists took control of the continent's resources, including gold, diamonds, and uranium. They also forced Africans to work in mines and plantations for little pay. The colonial system also led to the destruction of African cultures and traditions. One of the most infamous examples of French colonial brutality in Africa was the Rubber Terror in the Congo Free State. Under the rule of King Leopold II of Belgium, the Congo Free State was a private colony that was exploited for its rubber resources. Millions of Africans were killed or maimed during the Rubber Terror, which lasted from 1885 to 1908. The legacy of colonialism continues to shape relations between France and Africa today. Many Africans feel that France has never fully acknowledged or apologized for its colonial crimes. They also believe that France continues to exploit Africa's resources, and that it does not do enough to help Africans develop their economies. In 2017, the French president, Emmanuel Macron, made a speech in which he acknowledged France's colonial crimes in Africa. However, many Africans felt that Macron's speech did not go far enough. They also felt that France has not done enough to help Africans develop their economies. We can't leave out the military presence of France in its former colonies. Several thousand Western troops are stationed in its colonies. For example, in Niger alone, there are 1,100 Americans and 1,500 French soldiers deployed in the fight against terrorism in the Sahel, a semi-arid region plagued by the extreme effects of climate change and armed insurgents linked to Al-Qaeda and the Islamic State. At first glance, this may not seem to be a problem, but France's military involvement in Africa has raised concerns and influenced coups for several key reasons, each deeply impacting the lives of African citizens. Firstly, many people perceive France's actions as a continuation of neocolonialism, where some Africans feel their countries remain under external control despite gaining independence. This perception fuels a sense of resentment and anti-French sentiments, providing a backdrop that coup leaders may exploit for support. Secondly, France's interventions have, at times, appeared to support corrupt and undemocratic regimes in Africa. This has eroded the legitimacy of these governments, making them more susceptible to coup attempts. The effects of such instability reverberate through the daily lives of the people, impacting their governance, resources, and opportunities for progress. Lastly, the presence of France's military can create an atmosphere of fear and intimidation, stifling open dissent against the government and making it challenging to organize peaceful protests. This environment plays into the hands of potential coup leaders, who might exploit this climate of vulnerability to seize power without encountering significant resistance. We can't leave out the economic influence. France has a long history of economic influence in its former colonies in Africa. This influence has been used to extract resources from Africa and to prop up friendly regimes. However, it has also been a cause of instability and coups in some countries. One of the most visible ways that France exerts economic influence in Africa is through the CFA franc, the currency used by 14 countries in West Africa. The CFA franc is pegged to the euro, which gives France a great deal of control over the economies of these countries. France also charges high tariffs on goods imported from Africa, which makes it difficult for African countries to develop their economies. France's economic policies have often been seen as benefiting France more than Africa. For example, the CFA franc peg has been criticized for making it difficult for African countries to devalue their currencies and make their exports more competitive. In recent years, there has been a growing movement to challenge France's economic influence in Africa. In 2019, the West African Economic and Monetary Union, WAEMU, agreed to gradually phase out the CFA franc. This is a major step towards African countries gaining more control over their own economies. Francafrique. Francafrique is a complex and controversial system of political, economic, and military ties between France and its former colonies in Africa. It is often seen as a neocolonial system that allows France to maintain its influence in Africa. The term Francafrique was coined by the French journalist Jacques Foccart, who was a key architect of the system. Foccart believed that France had a special relationship with its former colonies and that it had a duty to protect them from outside interference. Under Francafrique, France has intervened militarily in several African countries, including Mali, Chad, and the Central African Republic. France has also provided financial and military support to African leaders who are friendly to France, even if they are corrupt or undemocratic. Francafrique has been criticized for its neocolonial nature. Critics argue that it allows France to exploit Africa's resources, and that it prevents African countries from developing their own economies. They also argue that Francafrique supports corrupt and undemocratic regimes. Despite the criticism, Francafrique remains a powerful force in African politics. France has a strong military presence in Africa, and it has close ties with many African leaders. This gives France a great deal of influence in the region. The future of Francafrique is uncertain. There is a growing movement to challenge the system, and some African countries are trying to reduce their dependence on France. However, it is likely that Francafrique will continue to be a major factor in African politics for many years to come. Here are some specific examples of how Francafrique has been used to support corrupt and undemocratic regimes. France has provided financial and military support to the regime of Omar Bongo in Gabon, despite the fact that Bongo was a corrupt and authoritarian leader. France has intervened militarily to prop up the regime of Laurent Gbagbo in Ivory Coast, even after Gbagbo was defeated in elections. France has supported the regime of Paul Biya in Cameroon, despite the fact that Biya is one of the longest-serving dictators in Africa. These are just a few examples of how Francafrique has been used to support corrupt and undemocratic regimes. This has led to resentment among many Africans, who feel that France is still trying to control their countries, even though they are independent. However, in recent years, other powers such as China and Russia have been offering former French colonies better options, which has weakened France's grip on the continent. China is particularly active in Africa, and it has been offering loans and investments to African countries at very favorable terms. This has made China a very attractive partner for African countries, and it has led to a decline in France's economic influence in the region. Russia is also becoming more active in Africa, and it has been providing military assistance to some African countries. This has made Russia a more attractive partner for African countries that are facing security challenges, and it has also weakened France's military influence in the region. The growing influence of China and Russia in Africa has weakened France's grip on the continent in a number of ways. First, it has made it more difficult for France to dictate terms to African countries. Second, it has led to a decline in France's economic influence in the region. Third, it has made it more difficult for France to intervene militarily in Africa. The decline of France's influence in Africa is a major shift in the global balance of power. It is also a reminder that Africa is no longer a French sphere of influence. African countries are now free to choose their own partners, and they are increasingly looking to China and Russia for economic and military assistance. Our exploration of the intriguing dynamics between Africa and France in the video titled Why Africa and France Have Fallen Out has illuminated crucial facets of a complex relationship with far-reaching consequences. As we reflect on the insights gained, several key factors stand out, shedding light on the reasons behind the strains and challenges in this connection. Firstly, historical legacies, including the colonial past, play a significant role. The shadows of bygone eras, even as both Africa and France have evolved, continue to shape perceptions, creating deep-seated narratives that influence current interactions. Secondly, economic imbalances and the quest for equitable partnerships have emerged as pivotal. The nuances of resource exploitation, trade agreements, and the distribution of benefits have, at times, created fissures in the relationship. The pursuit of fairness and respect for sovereignty must remain central to addressing these imbalances. Additionally, the evolving political landscape in both Africa and France has shaped this relationship. The intricate dance between power dynamics, democratic principles, and the aspirations of people all contribute to the ebb and flow of this connection. As we contemplate the path forward, it's essential to recognize the shared responsibility that rests on both sides. Building a bridge to renewed collaboration requires a commitment to dialogue, understanding, and a shared vision for a prosperous, peaceful, and mutually beneficial future. Furthermore, this video highlights the importance of global citizens like us, who, armed with knowledge and empathy, can advocate for positive change. We play a crucial role in shaping the narrative, encouraging transparency, fairness, and cooperation in international relationships. Let this exploration be a stepping stone towards a redefined partnership between Africa and France, marked by respect, equality, and a genuine commitment to the well-being of both African nations and the French people. By fostering meaningful dialogue, addressing historical grievances, and embracing a spirit of shared progress, we can hope for a future where the question shifts from why have Africa and France fallen out to how can Africa and France thrive together. This aspiration is not only within reach, but an imperative for a more harmonious world. If you enjoyed this video, do give it a thumbs up.